actually, when you mentioned to me that you were not a believer and that you had your own reasons for coming to a retreat, that actually was just as intriguing to me as the people who might say, well, I've been raised this way. So,
Yeah, I've been going to Holy Cross. Well, there was a long period of time when I was taking care of my parents that I wasn't able to get there since 2001. So it's been over 20 years. There have been significant changes at Holy Cross. When I first started going, you had the cows were they would lease out the land to graze cows, and on one of my visits I had to actually wrangle a calf back into the corral because it got out, and I had to make sure I didn't get too close to mom while I was doing it. Being a city person, I had absolutely no idea what I was doing. um, but I first heard about Holy Cross from an article in the Cleveland Plain Dealer, and it talked about the writer had gone to Holy Cross and talked about the fact that, number one, it was a silent retreat, which intrigued me, and there were no
yeah.
um, classes. There were, you didn't have to go anywhere or do anything. You could participate in the services with the monks. The brothers, they start at 4:30 in the morning. I have never been to the 4:30 a.m. Prayer service. No, ain't gonna happen. Um, and so I talked to my spouse Betsy, and I said, I'd like to do this. I was making a career change at the time, coming from the government, going into private practice, and I thought this would be a good reset. And I don't go for religious reasons or spiritual reasons in the traditional sense. Um, I'm an introvert, so I get my energy from within. And I find that when I'm in large groups of people, they just suck me dry. So, in that respect, Holy Cross, the guest house and the just being there is rewarding for me. Um, And I remember the first time I went, which was I think it was late March, early April of 2001. When I was finished, when I was leaving, I drove all the way back to Cleveland, which is close to a 6-hour drive, without
You
the radio
continued the
on.
silence.
It was I just I didn't want the noise. It was just talking to the toll booth people because this was before we had Easy Pass. And other than that, I didn't talk to anybody. I just drove home, and I appreciated that. I don't know about you, Steve, but many of my friends said, you did
Yes.
what for a week? And there was no Wi-Fi? How did you do? I mean, what did you do all day long? And I said, well, I walked, I sat by the river. I said,
Yep.
the Shenandoah is right there, and it's peaceful, and it gives you time to think. And too often, I believe that we don't have those opportunities in today's world to just sit and think without being disturbed by notifications and dings and buzzers and all the noise that seems to surround us. So, and it's why I keep going back. I need that periodically just to sit and, I read, I write when I'm there. And they have told me that a lot of the people who come to Holy Cross are writers. Because, the only rule is let them know if you're
Yeah.
not showing up for lunch and dinner so they don't plan for you, or actually nobody has to wait. But other than that, it's all yours. And now that they've got the natural cemetery, um, which when I was there a year and a half ago, and there were just a few graves. Now it's
Yeah.
almost full underneath the trees, and they're moving out into the area on the backside of the that open air chapel. Um,
That's
so I don't know
helpful
if
to me.
that's, you know,
I did talk to people before I went, and one person in particular said, four nights, parts of 5 days of silence, I would lose my mind. And maybe I'm enough of an introvert like you that I thought, I'm actually really looking forward to this. So one of my questions was about routine. When you go there, do you have a daily routine, or maybe is it an escape from a daily routine? Is it
um, I set out with things that I want to do, and then I find when I get there, I no, I don't. My schedule, I don't. The only thing I've got is lunch at noon and dinner at 6:15. Those are the two set, unless I have decided I'm not going to. I don't often eat lunch. I do when I'm at Holy Cross for some reason.
Mhm.
I don't know. It's the main meal, which I think a lot of people don't realize. And I got spoiled when the first few times I went because we had Brother Stephen, who when I first met him, I had checked in, and the check-in used to be a piece of paper on the bulletin board. You just literally checked your name and said, "I'm here." And then Brother Stephen would come down to your room and he'd knock and say, "You need anything?" But when I met him, I
Uh-huh.
thought he was the gardener because he was in a pair of old corduroys and a flannel shirt. And I said, "Yeah, I'm fine." And he didn't tell me. He said, "My name is Stephen." And I went, "Oh, okay." And then when I came in for lunch, he's sitting, or dinner, because it was first day. He's in robes, and he would read to us um, from the biography of Thomas Merton or something. And he told the absolute worst jokes. They were so bad you couldn't help but laugh. And he prided himself on that. And he was there. I know that he's gone now. I know that he's died because he must have been in his 70s when I first started going. And I have not seen him for quite a while. So, and I haven't asked because I don't want confirmation of that fact. I'm kind of hoping he just moved to another abbey and he's just not there anymore. Um, but my routine is at some point I get up in the morning. I may have breakfast. I may not. I may get up before dawn and go for a walk. Um, and walking before the sun comes up in that area is really weird because I usually
Right.
wear a headlamp because you can't see it. You can't see your hand in front of your face because there's no ambient light. And as I'm walking, and if I turn my head, I'm getting all these eyes looking at me from the trees and the underbrush, which is a little disconcerting. Um, but then it's like, okay, the depending on how high they are off the ground, I know whether they're deer or rabbits or raccoons or skunks, whatever. Um, and then I read, I sit outside, I go for another walk, and I think that's um, I'm almost afraid to tell you all of this because I don't want a bunch of people going there and us not being able to get back in because there's
Right.
there's only 16 rooms, but I it's nice to say you're going to do something and then realize you don't have to. That nobody's going to say, well, you missed this or you didn't come to this. It's another advantage of having a silent retreat that, I tell people the conversations are basically, you may say good morning to someone, good evening, good afternoon. At lunch, do you want water? And, there's no small talk, there's no faux friendships that you generally I mean you're the only person I have ever seen
Right. Right.
after I left who was one who had come to spend the week, and this time was the first time I stayed through the weekend,
Oh, okay.
so I was there from Monday to Sunday. which was really nice. And they just make sure that you know that they don't serve lunch on Friday because the week people are gone and the weekend people don't come in until 2 in the afternoon. And but I'm a Civil War buff, so
Definitely.
lots of Civil War battles
Well, let
fields
me
in the
ask you
area.
a
Yeah.
few
So.
questions about first. Maybe you've explained why a retreat of any kind, which is just to have the silence and be away from the daily routine. I think because you are an author, you're a code breaker, you're a retired lawyer. All of those things uh, that's intense, and it's the life of the mind. And I'm wondering, do you connect to a different part
Mm-hmm.
of yourself in a silent retreat like that?
Yeah, it's funny you should say that because at practicing law, I'm what I still do as far as law practice is concerned. I'm a volunteer lawyer with Hospice of the Western Reserve here in Cleveland. So I see people at the end of, literally at the end of their life. I've seen people like who I see on one day and they're gone 48 hours later. Um, and I find that you can have an intellectually stimulating career or job or something where you have to think, and the retreat,
Hmm.
I'm still thinking, but it's a different, um, it's a meander. I'll look at, I'll be, thinking about something and I look and something else catches my attention. A cat walks across the road. Oh, I wonder who the cat belongs to. Um, it's, um, it's almost like having a stream of consciousness with yourself. And and I have many friends who just cannot believe that I do this and that I keep going back. Um, I I've suggested it to some folks, and they just said I couldn't do that. And I said, actually, you could. You just have to trust yourself and rely on. I think people who are comfortable with themselves
Interesting to put it
handle
that
it
way. Yeah.
well. Um, uh, and if you constantly need to be around people, I think people who feel that they must always have somebody around them might give this a try. A weekend would be a good, because you can always leave. You don't have to
Yeah.
stay. It's not like they lock the doors at night and they don't let us out. Um, if it's not working, you can always get in the car, and if you drive off and go stay at a hotel or go to a bar or whatever. Um, but I think we sometimes believe that we are afraid of ourselves, of what we might think. Am I thinking the right things? Because there are so many rules in life. You can't do this
Mm.
because somebody might not like it. Well, when it's just you, if you don't like it, then don't do it. And I don't know about you, Steve, but do you ever argue with yourself and lose the
A couple
argument?
of times, I think.
It's a little disconcerting to know that you convince yourself that you're wrong. It's not somebody else doing it. You're just sitting there and you argue with yourself. I mean, I would find this practicing law, as I'd have an idea of how to handle a case, and I'd sit there and I'd have this preconceived notion of how I was going to do it, and then I'd convince myself that it was the wrong way, and I'd go in a different direction and try something else. And I think that Holy Cross lends itself to um, doing things you don't normally do. You don't have
Right.
the opportunity in life. When you're home, you got the laundry. Um, Betsy and I don't have children, but the neighbors stop by. Somebody knocks on the door and they're selling something. There's these interruptions, and when you're on the retreat, um, and I had never been on a retreat before I first went there, but it was nice to know that nobody was going to
Mm.
interfere. And I'm not even sure that's the right word. That I was basically I was on my own as far
So
as
I
what
know
I
some
wanted to
people go
do.
to a retreat
So,
where they're hoping to receive instruction, and but this is a
mm,
very different kind of a thing. So I'm two questions come to mind for me. One is there some benefit or some appeal to you that it's connected with a spiritual tradition, that it's an abbey rather than rent a beach house and no one will bother you?
ah, that's a really good question. And I have done, gone to a hotel. I was on a deadline writing a book, and I just needed to get everything together. And I went to a hotel, and I just hunkered down, and it was here in Cleveland, so it wasn't like I drove to a beach, um, and I managed to get things done. But the feel at Holy Cross, there is a
Hmm.
sense of calm in that place. And I realized it, I felt it as soon as I drove through the gate. And having been back so many times, I know when I get off of I-80 and I make that left-hand turn and I'm heading towards the turnoff to go to the Abbey, I can feel a physical relaxing, because I know that in a very short period of time, I'm going to be in a situation that is not demanding anything of me. Um, any demands will be only those that I place on myself. So, is it because of the spiritual nature? I don't know. I always go, well, not always. I missed a couple nights this time. I like to go to Compline, which is the final service of the day, um, because it is so quiet. And unfortunately, this was the first time I've been at Holy Cross when it was light outside at 7:30. I've never seen the brothers before. Every other time I've been there, and at
Oh, so
7:30 it's
you're
already
just hearing the
dark.
music.
You need a flashlight. I'm just hearing
Ah,
the monks speak, and the chants. I'm not seeing them. It's all candlelight. So there's this um, dark part at the front of the chapel, and you've got this. I don't know whether they recruit the brothers on the basis of their voices, because their
yes.
voices are so calming. Um, and I like it better when it was dark. And so I've decided I'm never going back again when it's light outside at night at 7:30. So it's before the time change. I have to go either very early spring or in the fall. Um, but Compline, um, I explain it to people by saying the prayer is, have a good sleep, and don't be afraid of the dark, and we're going to do away with the fears of the nighttime. Um, anybody, we've all been little kids. We've all been afraid of the dark at some point in our lives, and this is one of it's pretty much the only service I go to, because I find it to be the perfect end of a day. And having been this state through the weekend, I got to do it Friday and Saturday night as well. Um, but
Hmm.
I was raised Catholic, 12 years of Catholic schooling, um, and I just don't like the Catholic Church. Um, I don't feel welcome in it, and I'm not very fond of organized religion. There are too many rules. If you got to do this in order to get this, if you don't do this, then we aren't going to like you. And they're very rigid, my experience has been. So um, I prefer looking at it as, if you read the four Gospels and you follow those,
Hmm.
you're fine. You don't need to say that if you look at somebody cross-eyed in the church, that that's a bad thing. So in that respect, I suppose I'm spiritual to a certain extent, but I don't profess any specific dogma. Um, and my spouse was raised, her father was a Christian Scientist, and her mom was a lapsed Catholic. She has no religious upbringing at all, which is really interesting because I'll say something and she has make some reference to the Bible or some religious custom. She has absolutely no sense of
Hmm.
sense of reference to it. And I've never. We've been together almost 34 years, so it's um, she understands more about what I'm talking about, but she still doesn't. It doesn't resonate with her at all. And she's one of the sweetest people going. She's very gentle. She's very kind, and I think it's. And she's even thought about going with me. I told her, we'll try a weekend because she's like, I don't know if I can do that for a whole weekend. And I said, well, you can do it for 2 days. Anyway, you can do anything for 2 days. Um, so, so from I think that there's the calmness that one feels when they're at Holy Cross is um, palpable. There's something there when you walk through the grounds, go to the river. There's something there. I don't know. I don't know. I want to put a name to it or title it. So I don't know if
You
that's. I don't know
absolutely
if I'm
are.
answering your
And
questions.
so it's intriguing to me that there
Okay.
is, it's not just that you want to have nobody bother you for a few days. There actually is an element of peace that you find. You mentioned the palpable sense there, and
Hmm.
some sort of, whether it's defined or not, some sort of spiritual aspect to it.
Hmm. Yeah. I just. I mean, I'm not. I think the concept of spirituality and whether one is spiritual or not
Yes.
spiritual is very, very personal. Some people will say, I feel God, however they define God, Allah, Yahweh, um, whether they, whatever anybody's religious background. I think I find a sense of peace when I'm at Holy Cross that I often don't find elsewhere. And I know that I have gone there when things have been particularly disruptive in my life, and I come back in a better frame of mind. What's causing it? I don't know that I want to investigate it too much. I just know it works, and I feel at peace with myself. So I don't need to have anybody, um, I don't need the labels for it. And I and I've been there with where I've been one of the only lay people present. Been a lot of um, either religious order
Hmm.
brothers, not a lot of nuns. There have been a few, but not very many. Mostly it's priests and brothers that have come, which I also find interesting um, because they're and I sometimes wonder why more women haven't gone. I'm usually in the minority. There's not a lot of girls, which is interesting. But I mean, it's not that we socialize. It's not like they don't have the wine and cheese reception the first night.
So I did try and go to every service at least once when I was there, which included, I think, a 3:30 was the time of the because of
Or
the
was it 3:30?
seasons. I
I
don't know
know
if they
some.
time it with sunrise or but so I got up at 3:15, got dressed and made now I had also seen and taken photos of bunnies and deer and skunks and raccoons just on my walks. But that morning, being in the dark with just the light of the flashlight on my phone, my cell phone, I had the same experience of seeing eyes off in the woods as I walked through on the way to the monk's
Hmm.
chapel, and I remember thinking I feel very differently about what potential animals might be out there somehow because of the dark. Uh, I found myself thinking, "Am I going to turn
Right.
around? No, no, I'm going to keep going. I know it's just deer and all of these, but I really loved your experience of being there when you finished the comp line, the last service of the evening. It seems like the darkness would feel like that's just starting to envelop and truly be the end of the day. That just sounds really peaceful.
Hmm. Yeah, in fact, it was funny was because the word that was popping into my head while you were
Mm,
speaking was envelop, and it's like it's a warm blanket coming around you. And I usually I always take a flashlight with me because I just feel more comfortable. A headlight, so because it's fun when you're walking in the morning, you don't have to have something in your hands. But coming out of Compline, uh, just ready to go to sleep. And it's it's 8 o'clock at night, and it's like that's okay. You can still go to bed. Of course, you have to hit the kitchen and see if there's any cookies, um, or dessert, because you gotta have a cup of tea and a little piece of dessert at the end. Desserts were going fast this time. They were really good. It's a little side there, but the whole place is so quiet, and I don't know whether you noticed coming in on after Compline was the guest house's
yes,
cat.
I. So,
Did you notice him? Okay, so
mm,
he's been there for ages. I've never been there where that cat that and I don't know if it's the same cat. Looks like the same cat. He waits outside the door to be let in, and then his bed is in this little cupboard, and they feed him, and he sleeps overnight inside. And then in the morning, when they come to start fixing for getting ready for lunch and that, they let him out. He goes outside, but he sleeps all night, and he's very particular. There's a specific table and I put his bed out this time because I swear he was tapping his foot and looking at his watch, going, "Where's my bed? It's time." And I had never done that before because usually the bed is already up, but I found it and I put it up, and he hopped up, curled up, went to sleep. Next morning, the bed and the cat were both gone, and he was back that night. Um, so it's like even a cat that's an outdoor cat knows that it's pleasant to stay in that sunroom area at the front, um, because he gets fed and he's safe and he doesn't have to worry about anything happening. And I have never felt uncomfortable walking in the dark at Holy Cross. Um, there's just something that makes it safe. Um, they used to, I was
yes.
talking, I don't know if you went to the gift shop. Um, I had orders for fruitcakes, which I understand I don't like fruitcake,
Mm.
but I understand they were excellent. My neighbors were all raving. I asked one of the brothers if if they still had the um, Civil War Museum. I was on the second floor of the house that's there, and because there was a American Civil War battle that took place on the grounds, and one of the brothers had gone through and he was finding all sorts of things. And I asked the brother if it was still there, and he said no, that um, they they dismantled it because people were taking things. Who steals from an abbey? I mean, really. And so I looked at the brother and I said, they're going to go to hell. And he said, that's what I think. I mean, who steals from an abbey? So they donated all of everything that this brother had collected over the years. And I guess he'd been collecting for like 35, 40 years while he lived there. The brother who was doing it, he's dead. And they donated it to the county Civil War Museum, which I didn't get a chance to go see. But even from that perspective, when you think of the location, and that particular battle of Cold Spring isn't well known, but it
Mm-hmm.
was brutal. And there were, um, I want to say
Wow.
1,500 casualties. I might be wrong on my numbers there. But there were a lot of young men who were killed on both sides, north and south. Um, the North was drastically outnumbered. It was a battle that never needed to take place. And when I think about that and look at the pastoral nature of what we see now and what happened there in the 1860s, that's sobering. And if you walk down to the river, you can sit there and you can and it's really quiet there. It's quiet everywhere on the property, but when you get to the
Yeah.
river, it's just the sound
I
of the
stopped there
water.
myself.
Um, and yeah, and so it's I have never felt unsafe at Holy Cross, regardless of the weather or the time of day. But I guess I'm going to have to try that early morning thing. I am definitely not an
Well, I
early
got
morning
myself there,
person,
and
but
I was actually sort of pleasantly surprised that there was no chanting. It was only chanting the words. There was no singing of the chants. I guess even the monks think that's too early to sing.
okay. Well, they don't have their singing voices yet. It's too
Yep,
early. It's like you're
that
lucky I'm
that's
up,
how it felt.
let alone singing.
Joan Burda, thank you so much for sharing with us your thoughts and your experiences, and that you keep going back. Any final thing you'd like to say about what brings you back? You've talked about it a little bit.
Uh, I go
Mhm.
back because of the sense of peace. There are times when things just get so it's almost volcanic with everything's bubbling up, and I just need time away. And so I don't go every year. That may change now that I'm retired and I can. It was carving out time because it's an all day trip going and coming. But I would say anybody who's listening to this, if they have ever thought about it, there's no demands on you except telling them if you're not going to show up for lunch and dinner. The food is good too. People have asked me that. What's the food like? And the food's very good. Um, but I just want people to know that you don't have to be religious. You don't have to be Catholic to go there. You don't you don't have to do or be anything but willing
Mm.
to not talk. Just, if you've never tried it before, go for a weekend. Take a weekend and just be with yourself. Go sit out. They got chairs outside. Go sit outside for a while, and nobody's going to bother you. So I think parents with young children should find somebody to watch the kids and remember what it was like not to have somebody tugging at them constantly. But thank you for this opportunity, Steve.
And
This has
how
been
fun to
lovely.
I
I
mean,
appreciate it.
I found myself in the dining room with these other people, and we're giving each other our space. And even with passing the waters, often someone would just sort of theatrically hold up the water pitcher, like, "Would you care?" And you could say nod
Mm-hmm.
yes or shake your head no. And so there was interaction. But I found myself thinking, I bet these are really interesting people I'm sitting right next to or across from. And so this is a little extra bonus that I think I left a note by your plate the last day and said, or I said something like, "Pardon me, could I just ask you a question?" So it's so kind of you to take time.
This has been wonderful. I appreciate the opportunity. I'm glad we met, and perhaps I'll see you
It
again
will
at Holy
happen.
Cross.
Thank you so much.